I went viral this week, and I don't mean the heavy cold and cough that's going around at the moment, or the monkeypox. My lifestyle isn't that exciting. It was the following tweet. Here's what I tweeted. Quick reminder, the challenges for the pound are because we borrowed £500 billion, 500 billion, in a failed attempt to stop a predominantly mild seasonal respiratory virus. It went viral because it touched a nerve. The truth hurts, doesn't it? Now, it's very useful for the Labour Party, who conclude their conference today, to blame this new budget, which rightly aims to increase national income, on the challenges sterling now faces. Not so fast, because although ultimate blame must be with this government for the COVID measures, it was the cervix-free leader of the opposition who waved through the eye-wateringly damaging and expensive national lockdowns, and he's a man who wanted more. Remember those circuit breaker lockdowns he called for? And he called Freedom Day reckless. And save for 100 or so brave Tory backbenchers who risked their own careers to vote against lockdowns, this currency crisis, the national debt and the burden on future generations is on Johnson, it's on Starmer, and it's on an entire generation of politicians in the House of Commons. I also blame corporations who drove us round the bend with their excessive safetyism, plastic screens everywhere, hand sanitizer, needless mask enforcement, and arrows in supermarkets. I blame the unions who pushed for school closures, the effective mothballing of the NHS, and work from home. And I blame my colleagues in the media, who would have had you believe this was the bubonic plague. Well, a plague on their houses, because look at us now. It's laughable that the Labour Party claim the Tories are reckless with money, when the only change they would make to the mini-budget is to scrap the 45% top-rate tax cut, which costs either £2 billion a year or nothing, depending on who you ask. As more people would move up the pay scale, there's an argument it's cost neutral. Either way, it's a small price to pay to encourage wealthy people to live here, stay here, spend their money here and pay their taxes here. I don't know about you, but I want their cash. Now, amid all the hysteria this week, I'm optimistic that Britain will bounce back. The currency has already settled this afternoon. We have the second lowest debt to GDP ratio in the G7. And we have an agile and dynamic economy, unlike the heavily industrialised, energy-hungry Germany or heavily unionised France and Spain. Italy is now in so much debt, the risk that it will fall over threatens the mother of all sovereign debt crises in the Eurozone. Another reason why in years to come we will count our blessings that we're out. But folks, we have a big problem going forward. It's not debt, in my view, which is a short to medium-term headache. The elephant in the room is spending. Businesses sweat over their spreadsheets, looking at staffing costs, tax liability and overheads, and how they tally with income. Capitalism is wonderfully efficient and unforgiving. If you run a business, you are allergic to waste. Profligacy and waste are kryptonite to private enterprises. In the public sector, not so much. Now, I love the doctors and nurses who work in our NHS. They're the best of our country. But why do people boast that the NHS is the biggest employer in Europe? That's not a good news story. That's a bad news story, particularly given that we lag in almost every league table when it comes to medical treatment, with a health service asleep at the wheel for decades as the population gets fatter, more diabetic and more medicated. For the hysterical cost of the NHS, public health is a disaster. It's enough to make you sick. The painful truth is the NHS is getting worse as it gets more expensive. Our teachers are incredible and state schools largely do a brilliant job. I speak from experience. But the cost per pupil of education in England is approaching £10,000 a year. Are those kids really getting bang for their buck? Again, when you look at the World League table of academic achievement. Chris McGovern from the Campaign for Real Education told me on GBNews just a few months ago that Britain spends among the most in the world on education, but lags behind relatively poor countries like Vietnam, whose children achieve far higher attainment at a fraction of the cost. Why? Because of traditional teaching methods, discipline, and a culture of hard work and accountability in the classroom. Oh, and tests and exams. Now, last time I checked, none of those things cost a penny. As proved by social mobility czar Catherine Birbalsingh, whose free school in Wembley, Michaela Community School, has transformed the fortunes of some of the poorest kids in the borough, getting them to Oxbridge in some cases by ditching progressive policies in the classroom. Waste is everywhere, and because it's public money, no one cares. Suppliers overcharge for goods, contractors overcharge for services. What about the NHS managers on six-figure salaries? Police forces filling out endless paperwork and spending thousands painting cop cars in the colours of the rainbow. And telling us not to misgender convicted male paedophiles who want to be a lady now. And what do the councils do with the billions we pump in their direction, given they can barely collect the bins once a week? So-called austerity in the 2010s was anything but. It barely scratched the surface. You, the taxpayer, are not getting good value for money. And now that things are so tight, with departmental budgets inevitably shrinking, we face the perfect storm of rising costs and worse public services. If you think this pro-growth strategy is a worry, just imagine a Labour government that will give everyone a pay rise, lock down again at the drop of a hat, and scrap fossil fuels by 2030. Labour are planning to create a new energy company based on flaky and expensive renewables. Ask Germany how that's working out for them. Hundreds of billions they've spent in less than a decade, and the lights will be out in Munich this winter. If the 1970s taught us anything, it's that governments are not enterprising. Politicians don't create businesses, entrepreneurs do. A big spending Labour government in the pocket of the unions, blindly pursuing net zero, would see the pound sliding faster than Torvill and Bloody Dean at the Olympics. Labour don't have policies, they have ways of spending your money. And there's no money left, so you're looking at more borrowed billions. And the current government have sunk us with lockdowns, absolutely. So we've got to go for a simple economic model going forward, which is low tax and small state to generate the prosperity that we all require. This is not trickle down, it's trickle up. A growing economy helps everyone and provides the national income with which to help the weakest in our society. If we do this, and if Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng hold strong with their vision for this country, Britain will become a model for the 21st century economy across the free world. If we carry on like we are, living on the crack cocaine of credit, then it's a race to the bottom. When it comes to our economic challenges, tax is not the problem. We are living beyond our means and ignoring shocking amounts of waste and inefficiency in the public sector. And post-pandemic, with talk of a universal basic income, paying people to sit on their asses at home, watching Loose Women and Countdown, expectations are now far too high about what the government can do, especially one running a colossal budget deficit. The state should shrink and the economy should grow, not the other way around. No one wants to talk about it or acknowledge it, but out of control spending is the elephant in the room. Tusk, Tusk.